all across the world, all across the Caribbean, Guyana, and of course, our listeners joining us over radio and the fellow broadcasters who are carrying us live by various television stations to you all. Welcome to Room 592, where we unleash the truth. And ladies and gentlemen, we're privileged tonight to have a distinguished gentleman who has been, I would rather say, more Guyana than a lot of Guyanese have been over the couple of months, couple of years. And Mr. Greg Quinn, Honorable Greg Quinn, High Commissioner, British High Commissioner to Guyana, would have certainly etched his name in the history of Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, when our sons and daughters will be reading up on the history of this country, especially during these couple of years, Mr. Honorable Greg Quinn's name would certainly be up there. And sir, we want to just say thank you for being here in Guyana. Thank you for doing all that you have done, and welcome you to your Room 592. It is unlikely for me to really say to you a welcome and a farewell, but you know how life goes.
Yes. All good things come to an end, Yog, and my time here is coming to an end now after 5.5 years in Guyana.
Yes. So, High Commissioner, it has been a full 5 year, wouldn't you say? A 5 year that I guess and I hope would really be on top of your distinguished diplomatic career, sir.
Oh, I mean, whenever I arrived here, I was expecting to be here for 3 years. I've been extended 3 times. I've done 2 elections, 2 local elections. We could talk about later about all the other stuff. But this was also, of course, the first time I've ever actually been a head of mission. So there's any number of reasons why my time here in Guyana is special. And it's been a really good time, and I'm really sad to be leaving.
Great. And let me say, I would rather think it is 3 elections, because don't forget the local government elections that would have happened in between.
Actually, 2 local government elections, so it's 4. Four, of course.
That itself is another distinguishing mark for you, sir, because guess what? For a long time, before these last local government elections, we didn't have many years.
No, I mean, what was it? 21 years up until the first set of local government elections in 2016. So, yeah, and something which we had advocated, my predecessors had advocated very strongly for, were those, as had our colleagues, our local government elections. So 2 sets of local government elections as well as 2 general and regional elections is a lot.
Indeed, sir. And sir, August 2nd, 5 months after March 2nd, but it did eventually happen. Yep. What are your thoughts now, sir? We are in a democracy finally. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think it was a declaration based on a credible recount, which we all thought it was a credible recount. We called for the elections to be declared on the basis of the recount. It was the right decision. It took 5 months, too long, but we got there in the end, and we are now in a place where we can start looking forward, and we can start sort of talking about how Guyana develops, having been what I think was a very difficult and stressful 5-month period for a lot of people, Yog. And I think, it's now up to the new government, the new legitimate government, to push forward with the manifesto and with what President Ali said in his inauguration address last week.
And sir, if you don't mind me putting this on you right at the top of the show here, you would have come in for a lot of flack. You and the other diplomats stood on a particular path, and you came in for a lot of flack. Notwithstanding that, what does you as a distinguished diplomat say to the now opposition?
I think they have a role. I mean, any democracy needs 2 sides. It needs to have a government and it needs to have an opposition. And the opposition has a very important role in holding the government and the administration to account. And I expect the opposition to do that with gusto and vigor, and do its job. And if it sees wrong, to point out that wrong, if it sees, if it sees a situation where maybe it can contribute. The nature of democracy is there's a winner and a loser. The nature of the system here is a winner and a loser, and that's just the way it is. And I'm sure we'll talk later about constitutional reform and such like. But the important thing, is I think this opposition, the previous coalition government, has a very important role to play in continuing the democratic principles which exist in this country.
Thank you for that, sir. If you don't mind, High Commissioner, you would have been 5.5 years now. So you would have been here when the PPP would have demitted office.
Yeah.
At that time, there was a lot of discussion, public discussion about the reformation of the security sector, to which Britain had itself offered to invest heavily in upgrade of our sector. I don't think much happened then. Elections came and went, another elections came and went. But in February this year, you signaled that Britain is still interested in playing its role in the reformation. You want to talk us through it a little?
I mean, I think more has actually happened over the course of the 5 years than people actually see, because the nature of some reform is a lot of it is done behind the scenes. It's not necessarily very public. So I think where we are and what we have done over 5 years has gotten us to a good solid basis. And certainly our desire and our hope, and based on what the president has said, is that we will now move to a phase of implementing a lot of the work and a lot of the recommendations which which were put forward in the previous 5 years. Did I wish things had happened a bit more quickly? Well, yes, of course. But the nature of government and the nature of the system is sometimes it goes slower than you expect. It certainly does in the UK. But certainly there's a desire to continue that work on security sector reform here, as there is in other areas as well.
Why security sector reform, sir?
Well, I mean, I think this has been something which we've been working on in reality for 20 years. If you go back to the early 2000s, there was a request put to the UK to help with security sector reform to make the police force in particular more impactful and to increase the level of trust and respect within the general populace. And fundamentally, in any system, you need to have public trust and public respect in the law enforcement agencies. And at the same time, you need to make sure those law enforcement agencies are as efficient in terms of how they manage their finances, in terms of how they have leadership as possible. And so what we have been looking to do is to sort of put in place the most efficient, or to help put in place the most efficient and most effective police force there can be. It's not an easy job sometimes. And there's in any country, there's a lot of suspicion and a lot of questions about the activities of law enforcement. But I think our desire is to push that forward to make the police and other parts of the security sector as efficient, as effective, and as respected as possible.
Right. High Commissioner, if you don't mind me, based on your working in a number of countries, and of course from your homeland too, security sector reform in a country like Guyana, where everything is politicized, does it make it more difficult? And allow me here, sir. Given this last election, given what had happened, a lot of persons have seen actions taken by the police force itself as having been politically tainted. So you rightly mentioned confidence in the police force is one of the biggest things. How do we then go about getting to that level?
Well, I think there's two things here. Let me first talk about, sometimes there's a lot of perception of a particular issue, even if it is not an issue in reality. So some people might believe there's a certain situation, or a certain approach, which might not actually be the case. But in many respects, it doesn't matter if it isn't the case. What matters is the perception. So organizations, any government organization, any law enforcement organization needs to think about how a certain action might be perceived. And that's a leadership issue as much as anything. Secondly, you talk about the difficulties. Well, as you say, let's go back to Northern Ireland, my home country, a place where the police force was viewed with great suspicion by one side of our religious divide. Huge suspicion. And part of the whole reconciliation and peace process that we went through, which was a very difficult process in many ways, because lots of people had to compromise and change their positions for the greater good. And one of the major changes, obviously, which came out of the Northern Ireland Police, the Northern Ireland peace process, was changing what was the Royal Ulster Constabulary to the police service of Northern Ireland, and to change the leadership, because one of the major things which came out of the whole process was the lack of trust in one side of the community. So it's a difficult process, but we have shown, and it's not perfect, Yog. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Northern Ireland is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But the fact of the matter is, as I've said before, where there is a will, there is a way. Where there's a will, there's a way, and no obstacle is insurmountable.
Correct. Thank you, sir. And indeed, I think a lot of Guyanese, we welcome a robust professional police force that will act way above, what may have been the inefficient modalities. Sir, my last thing on the security sector reform is twofold. The one is the whole aspect of Guyana in the past, and that has always been maybe being viewed as a transshipment point for drugs. That's in the UK's estimation of a reform of security sector in Guyana. And the second one is, you would appreciate, having been here for 5.5 years, the porous nature of our borders, which makes national security also a risky one, isn't it?
Yeah, the second point first, hugely difficult problem. Whenever you've got a population of 750,000, 800,000 people, 83,000 square kilometers of land space. It's a huge problem having the resources to do it. And there will always be criminal elements who will take advantage of it. So it's a real challenge going forward. And there's ways you can use technology or maritime or aerial assets to overcome that lack of boots on the ground, for want of a term. And the drugs and the transshipment, it has been historically a fact of life of coming from here. But that's a result partly of the second one. It's not necessarily Guyanese doing this. It's others, others from other countries doing it. But one of the things that you see is, drug dealers will go to the places where it is easier for them to do business. So if you toughen up in the regulations, if you toughen up in the shipment stuff going out of Georgetown, they will go elsewhere. So there's things which you can do to make life difficult for those drug transshippers, which means it doesn't solve the problem, but it moves it elsewhere, and then you have to sort of deal with it. You have to deal with it elsewhere. And some of the work which we have been trying to do, and some of our colleagues have been trying to do, is to make Guyana more broadly unattractive to these people.
That's well put, Leonard. Make Guyana unattractive to these people.
No, I would agree with that. I would always say to the good High Commissioner, like I say to you, Yog, I don't tolerate people saying anything unattractive by my beautiful lady called Guyana. But it is what it is, huh? But I know. Do you like our? I must ask the good commissioner this. Do you believe that our food is better than Great Britain?
That's a very unfair question, Leonard. But what I will
Why?
what I
Because
will
you.
say is we do share a
Yes.
very clear. We share a very very clear love of curry. I mean, the national dish of the UK now is effectively curry. I mean, let's be in no doubt about that. So I do like my curry. I love my pepper pot, no question about that. I have come to enjoy spicy food a lot more since I've been here than I used to in the UK, because that's what everybody says. British food is bland and boring. Come here, get a bit of spice, far better.
I'd be very curious to know what they call it, whether it's chicken curry or curry chicken, because that would be very thing.
Well, it's obviously chicken curry, isn't it?
Well,
We're not in Trinidad. It's chicken curry.
all right, very good. I'm glad that you backed us on that. I want to bring you back. I want to bring you back to this election thing because a lot of persons.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that really shocked me during this election time, I probably never really paid attention, was the amount of attacks on persons, and then we saw it on the diplomats as well. Is this something that is
Mhm.
normal? What were your thoughts of that? I think you came in. I think Yog did mention that, but you came in for some severe attack as well as Lillian Chatterjee of the Canadian High Commission. What were some of your thoughts going through your mind? Is this normal?
Well, I mean, it's sort of sometimes it does come with the territory, Leonard. I mean, in my 25 years in the Foreign Service, I've been tear gassed, I've been baton charged by policemen, I've been shot at. Being called names and whatever is the lower end of some of the more difficult things I've had. It's unpleasant, obviously. I think sometimes it's unnecessary. And but fundamentally, I and my colleagues were doing, and over 120 other different countries. I mean, it wasn't just me. It wasn't just three or four of us. It was over 120 countries who were sitting there making a very clear stand for the fundamental principles of democracy, good governance, rule of law, which we in the UK and also Guyana, as a member of the Commonwealth, as a member of CARICOM, has signed up to. And
Hmm.
so, therefore, there are comments about interference in sovereignty. Well, actually, it's not interference because it's standing up for the rights and responsibilities which all of us have agreed to.
And yes, and as we continue on the elections, sir, I have two questions before I hand over to my very gracious host. On the election, when was it clear to the diplomats and maybe to yourself that something was wrong, that the election was being rigged? And that's the use of the word is out there. And are persons identify as facilitating the rigging or taking an active part? Are they still to be sanctioned or still under sanction?
I think there's still a discussion that we're having about, we talked about, the Foreign Secretary talked about consequences for some individuals, for some actions. And I think there's still a discussion to be had about how we take those forward, because ultimately wrongdoing cannot go without consequences. So that's a discussion that's still ongoing. On the first part, I think it was probably Leonard. Was it the third, the fourth? Was it the 4th of March? I must admit, I've lost track really. But it was that day whenever the spreadsheet started to be used, whenever the returning officer started to read that declaration. It was very clear to everybody who was in Ashman's, from all of the observer groups, that this was not producing a credible result. There were 879 statements of polls. We hadn't even got through half of those before the process was suddenly changed. And I think that's when everybody started to question where this was going and how this was not credible.
Mm-hmm.
And on that day, on March 13th, I think it was, Leonard, when the diplomatic community said the following words: "Don't do anything that could lead to Guyana's isolation."
Mm-hmm.
And I think, sir, unfortunately, it took 4 additional months therefrom before we, and I must say this, and your thoughts, please. It is actually the fear of international repercussions and the reality of sanctions that may have very well seen the end of that period in our history. Your thoughts, sir?
I mean, there was as you well know, there was a long train of legal processes, and it was only really, if you think about the Chief Justice's last ruling, before the last Court of Appeal ruling, where she had said, look, this is res judicata. You know, we have been here, we have done that. That hadn't been so clearly articulated before. And I think that very clear articulation of the fact that everything that could possibly be discussed outside of an elections petition has been discussed. So guys, time to move on and go to something different. And I think that's, you know, that's where we now need to go. You know, it's now about, look, I think there's going to be a lot written about the last 5 months or the last 18 months or the last whatever. You know, and that's fine. But, you know, now's the time to start thinking about, okay, we have a new government. We have a very clear outlook of what the president says he wants to do. Now we need to start working with that government and with the government to start helping to deliver that and deliver it for every single man and woman and child in this country, because that's the key thing. And the second thing is, you know, the system has got to change. We cannot be in this place in 2025. We cannot go through the last 5 months in 2025 because it was stressful for everyone. It had an economic impact, never mind the COVID additional on top of that. It just was not for the country. And so therefore the system needs to be changed to ensure we don't go through it again in 5 years' time.
Well said, sir. Leonard and I would have on radio daily. We were on this thing every day for the past 5 months. And one of the things I did express publicly is whatever a government does, it creates a precedence for the future. A dangerous precedent sometimes. And you are right. Critical reforms are needed so that precedence would not be used. Sir, GCOM. You know, in terms of what would have happened in the past, the president did announce they're going to do the forensic. They're going to have a commission of inquiry, according to the vice president's release today. It's going to be a commission of inquiry. Leonard, our prophetic words have borne fruit today. I'm proud of that. But sir, to you, how would the British government, how are you guys interested in seeing that the Elections Commission can be reformed? But hear me out with this. Guyana has such a robust system. I mean, we have rules upon rules, ID cards, which not many countries use, all of these restrictions in place. But yet there has been problems. What else can we reform?
So I think, you know, if you go back to GCOM's creation in its current phase, you know, 1992, it was never meant to still be in its current form in 2020. And every election report that has come from every election subsequently has talked about the need to reform GCOM because it was designed for a specific time and a specific situation. So there's lots of stuff out there, and you know, about how there needs to be a change in GCOM, and I certainly would agree with that. But I think there's the broader constitutional reform as well, which needs to be done. And this needs to be a process which is driven from the bottom up. You know, it needs to be a process which is driven by, so the people need to be told that they might not get everything they ask for, but it needs to be driven from the man and woman on the street. It needs to be driven by civil society. It needs to be driven by the media. This is not a process which should be from the politicians down. And the reason it needs to be driven from the bottom is that then you have everybody buying into the process. And then it works, filters up through the system, and then you have at least 2/3 of the National Assembly voting for it, which means all of the political parties have to vote for it. And therefore, they are all committed to it. And if they don't then deliver on it, then they have to justify why they were suddenly in a position, they were suddenly in favor of a point X, but are no longer. Now, the fact is, when did we last have any sort of constitutional reform here, Yog, 20 years ago? That's a long time, So it's easy for people to forget or not be committed to it in the same way. But clearly, this last 5 months has shown that the system as is, be it GCOM or be it more broadly, does not work and needs to be changed, or else in 5 years' time, we risk being in exactly the same position. And I'm not sure how many of us could survive another 5 months like the last 5 months.
Of course. And let's talk a little bit about constitutional reform, sir. You did mention it. And so it is critical. Constitutional reform will require, in a lot of ways, 2/3 of the parliament. The way the political divide is presently, I don't know that we are going to get that 2/3, are we?
But this is where the other part of this, and you've heard me talk a lot more over the last 5 months, Yog, about reconciliation. Because I think there needs to be this fundamental reconciliation like we had in Northern Ireland, albeit with a far more extreme situation. But there needs to be a process where the leadership of, the leadership brings their supporters to understand that there needs to be compromise, that the other side has got legitimate concerns which need to be taken into account. And that that they're brought into a new process. And then, if that happens, you make it easier to do the reform. Now, there's a lot to be done in a compressed period of time, but I think you do need to address the legitimate concerns that exist amongst pockets, or not pockets, but amongst people on both sides of the ethnic divide about the other side. And until you get people in a better place about things like that, then you're right, it is going to be difficult to do the reform. But on the reconciliation piece, whereas constitutional reform might be bottom up, the reconciliation piece has to be top down, because the politicians have to show and have to explain to their supporters why this is the right thing to do and why it is the good thing to do for the betterment of everybody. And as we saw in Northern Ireland, when people pull together, and it's still not perfect, I've said that before to you, when we move to a better place in the centre, everybody benefited. Everybody benefited. And the Northern Ireland of today, economically, politically, whatever, is a better place because both sides compromised and changed than it was whenever the two groups were stuck at extreme ends.
Correct. Hi, Commissioner, just to change topic a little bit. So after here, where are you heading for, sir?
Well, I'm heading for 4 weeks holiday, first of all. So that's the first plan. And then ironically, if you think you're getting rid of me, I'm sorry, because certainly in the short term, I'm going to be working on the Caribbean and Guyana back in London. So I'm still going to be involved in what happens here. I'll be trying not to have my 5,000-mile-long screwdriver. I'll be trying to resist the temptation of that and telling them what to do. But I'm still going to be doing Guyana.
Great. I'm reminded, sir, in Guyana, unfortunately, your politicians, a lot of them, they want to hold on to this notion called power forever and ever and ever, right? People don't want to give up at all. And I'm mindful of an article I read when Tony Blair when he got out of power. I remember a month later, I can't remember who was the author of the article, but somebody wrote that, the time will soon come when Tony Blair will hop into the back of a cab and the driver will peer at him through the rearview mirror and say, I've seen you on TV. I hope that's no time. It's no near time for you, sir. You are going to be in public life quite some time as yet. Sir, I want to just come right back to the Elections Commission. I see Leonard has a question to ask you there, but let me ask you first of all, do you think that the format of selecting a chairman of GCOM requires a revisit as well? Forget the commission itself.
Well, actually, I mean, I think everything's always open for debate, but the principle of having a chair of GCOM who's agreed between the political parties. Now, I think the question now is you have a situation where you have a third group, they have the rejoinder list now, who have a seat in Parliament. So I think, it's probably not just a question of one and the other agreed. There has to be an input for this third group now. But, so I think generally this how you select a chair is fine. I think the broader issue is the commissioners, and the fact that the way, as long as you have the system it is at the minute, you are always going to have a situation which is very confrontational with 3 versus 3, which puts the chair in a hugely difficult position. The chair should not be the casting vote so often. The chair of any organization should be bringing everybody together to consensus, not having to vote with this side or that side.
Absolutely. Leonard?
Yes, and I do thank you for that. And I want to bring you straight to oil and gas, big
Yes.
issue here. And of course, I know that you have a lot you would want to say. Since 2015, there's been a lot being said in the newspaper, especially in Kaitra News, especially. And I want to ask you, sir, whether it is that you're satisfied with the current level of oil and gas governance in Guyana. That's my first part. I'm going to come back to you. I want to hear what you have to say.
I mean, I think, we've got to remember where Guyana started off on this and how you have gone from discovery to production in a very fast period of time with a very small government in terms of human numbers, in terms of people. So I think, there may well be an argument that you should bring in some capacity in a short term to help you with governance, that there needs to be a bit of a look at how you do local content, how you do a petroleum commission, etc., how you do a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, my view, leaving aside the very positive aspects I have about the potential of oil and gas to help the broader development of the country, which we can talk about later if you want. But in terms of governance, I think any British company welcomes a very clear set of rules for how they operate, as long as those rules are also very realistic. So let's talk local content, for example. If you say you want to have local content, fantastic. British companies will love that because that's what they want. They're quite happy to go with local. They want to build up local capacity. But you can't expect that local content to go from 0 to 100% in a day. So you need to put in place, well, this is what I mean by realistic. You need to say, okay, we accept that in this particular area, we haven't got the expertise locally. So we agree that you can bring in, an expat to do that. But in return, we expect you to train up a local to replace that expat in 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, whatever is a realistic time scale. So I think that, realistic legislation and clear legislation so that everybody knows what the rules are and also that the rules are fairly applied to everyone. So nobody gets special dispensations. everybody is treated equally.
And with which I would have wanted to follow up, and which is a question that somebody has sent in here. What are some of the, if you were in a position to advise the government and the people of Guyana, what would you say to them that would help us keep the tentacles of oil companies out of our governance structure?
I'm not quite sure I know the answer. I'll have that one, Leonard. But I think the fundamental point is by putting in place policies and legislation which lay out the rules and make the rules very clear and are enforceable and equally applied to everybody. And one of the things which we have been doing here, we have been working with the IMF and the GRA on helping ensure that the GRA has the human capacity and the skills to ensure all large taxpayers, which include obviously oil companies, are paying the taxes that they should pay, so that therefore the country is getting the revenue that it should do. And I think, that's the fundamental bit of your question. Have the rules very clear, make sure they're applied equally, but at the same time make sure they're realistic. And if you need outside help at the start to do that, then don't be afraid to bring in outside help. Just because you have to go to somebody else to ask for help in a very specialized area does not mean you're selling out the country. What it means is that you understand there's a lack at the moment in that particular area, and that you are bringing it in to ensure that you get the best deal and the best policy or the best legislation possible.
And so your bottom line there is to ask for help.
I mean, ask for help, take help, bring it in, but at the same time, if you want to, put down, okay, if you want to come in and help us on this, then as I say, we want you to start training up local people to do that work. But also don't forget, there's a large diaspora out there, Leonard. You keep hearing about how there are more people living outside Guyana than living inside Guyana who are Guyanese. It's a bit like the Irish. There are more Irish outside Ireland than in Ireland. But so don't be afraid to ask the diaspora, because they have got skills. They have got experience which you can use. So that's I think my sort of fundamental takeaway, or one of my fundamental takeaways.
But sir, you see, one of the issues we have had in Guyana for decades, and I'm not necessarily asking your comment here, but one of the issues we have had is that governments have always make appointments based on loyalty, period. It's all, about party loyalty and not necessarily who's best for what job. Time will tell whether the current government has really made the right appointments. But, I'm really hoping that very soon successive governments of Guyana can look at more professionalism than party loyalties. And that brings me to something that I omitted asking you, sir, when we were talking a little bit about security sector reform. Guyana's had a historical problem with what has been politically bandied around as extrajudicial killing. It has been the bone of contention for racial bitterness, political bitterness, name it. It has not stopped. We had in Room 592 a lawyer from Canada here 2 weeks ago who said that, a lot of people don't realize that under the last government, after the AFT government, extrajudicial killing occurred. Now, how does a country like Guyana start to address these things seriously, sir?
Well, you're going straight back to the whole reconciliation process, aren't you? There's another, because that's exactly the sort of thing which you would address under a reconciliation process, because people have a deep-seated belief or a deep-seated worry or a deep-seated fear, and by in Northern Ireland, we aired some, really difficult subjects and some really hard subjects. This sort of thing. killings by one side or killings by the other side. And, you have, it sounds a bit blasé. It's not meant to be, but by talking and airing grievances, it has a cathartic effect. And sometimes in some things, people just need to feel that they're being listened to and that their concerns are being taken on board to overcome some of that historical. I mean, I'm a historian by training. My favorite bit is looking to the past. But the reality is, as we discovered in Northern Ireland, if you're going to benefit everybody in progress, you've got to start looking to the future. And you can't dwell on the past, because if you dwell on the past, it'll kill you. Because there is so much bad stuff in the past. Doesn't mean you don't take the past into account. It doesn't mean that you don't discuss the past. It doesn't mean that the past doesn't feed in. But you need to find a way of dealing with the past in a way that makes people content to then move forward and to think, not forget what happened, but to think, okay, that's done. What do we do thinking about going forward? Mm-hmm. And this sort of bit about the extrajudicial killings, Yog, I think is perfect, because, as you said, the lawyer from Canada talk, oh, well, the PNC did this, oh, they do, oh, but the PPP did this. Right. You can bandy these things back and forth forever.
Correct. Sir, diplomatic relations, Britain, Guyana. All diplomatic circles and all embassies and everybody is reforming, especially with COVID-19. And, we have gone through this thing where now Guyanese, I think when we apply for a British visa, to visit, it takes a processing time.
Yeah.
It virtually goes out of the country, I think. Is there any sentiment, any change that you foresee that will be coming, given that Guyana will certainly now become one of the go-to places for a lot of you guys, a lot of people?
Well, I mean, I think this has been thrown at me quite, we've only become interested in Guyana since oil and gas came along. Well, I would dispute that quite strongly. I think we've been interested in Guyana for a long time, and that the post and pre and post the colonial period, we have had good times and we have had bad times. But the fact of the matter is, we're still friends most of the time. And I remember saying to then President Ramotar, when I presented my credentials in February of 2015, friends often differ. And that's what we have done. But yet, despite all of the problems and all of the issues in the past, we're still here. And we're still very close. We're still, as you say, we are equal members of the Commonwealth. We share similar values in the Commonwealth and throughout other organizations. So I think there's been a long-standing interest and long-standing activity. Now, on visas, I have never been posted anywhere, with the exception of the US, where visas were not a major bone of contention. And it is certainly my hope and my desire that we will make the process as easy and as simple as possible going forward. There's work to be done on that. It's been far from ideal in the past. I recognize that. And I hope we will be getting ourselves to a better place, because this is about making it easier for Guyanese to go to the UK. Because it's easy for Brits to come here. I mean, let's be honest. It's easy for Brits to come here. But what I want is to make it easier for Guyanese to get to the UK.
After all, if things go the way it ought to go, Guyanese will have a lot of money to spend, and you would want us to spend. High Commissioner, let me just read to you this message coming from one Mr. Hazrat Ali. He said, his opinion is that the Honorable High Commission can play a major role for our country. Please ask him if he would accept citizenship and share
This
share his
this
expertise
is
to
an
bring our people
interesting one.
together.
I would love to hear what his answer is.
I think there's been a few people saying, "Oh, but you've been here for 5.5 years. You can apply for citizenship." Because I'm a common citizen. Yeah, but I've been here as a diplomat, so that rule doesn't apply. I also remember having a discussion with somebody who tried to register me to vote on the basis of the fact that I was a Commonwealth citizen, and I said, "Yes, I'm not." So sadly, despite the length of time here and people thinking I might be eligible for citizenship, the nature of my appointment here prevents that.
Yeah, I understand. And just one more I'll read to you, sir. Audrey Kaladin Aziz says, "We thank you, Honorable Greg Quinn, for standing with the Guyanese people during especially the 5 months of frustration, mental health issues, just to name a few, that you stood by our side so democracy can prevail. You will never be forgotten. We love you. God bless you." That's from one of our viewers there, sir. High Commission, I need to ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Memories of Guyana that you're going to take with you. Places. So tell us one or two of the places you visited here, sir.
I mean, the problem is, we've been here 5.5 years. There's so many of them. One of the things which I've always done throughout my career is get out of the capital as much as possible. So I've been all the way to the western border with Venezuela. I've been all the way down to Oriala in the east. I've been down to Sand Creek. I've been in lots of places in between. And, I've got lots of different memories, or lots of very good memories from lots of places. I must admit, and I apologize to my friends along the coast for this, I do have a particular soft spot for the Rupununi, and my staff, the staff here, or the team here at the High Commission, actually had a painting of the Rupununi done specially for me as a leaving gift, because they know that, and I have lots of very happy memories of spending lots of good time down in the Rupununi, and it's the getting away from the capital and just sitting there and not having any internet and not having any phone signal and just having the world go by and watching it go by.
Yes, indeed. That will be something I guess you will be remembering, and certainly visiting again for that experience. Sir,
I'm sure.
Your message to the Guyanese people. Everybody's online, everybody is listening on radio. We have people from Pomeroon, Caribbean, all over. Nikeri also is tuned in, Caribbean. Your message to the Guyanese people.
I think it's very simple. We keep hearing this stuff about the potential of Guyana. It is clearly there. Now is the chance. Everybody works together, the politicians and the people. This country can become a country which will benefit every single person that lives here, but also can become, as it once was before, a very clear leader within the region. I think now is a good time to be Guyanese, and there is a huge opportunity here for Guyana to really drive forward.
Great.
I'm just sorry I won't be here to see it, Yog.
Well, you know what? Maybe next time, Leonard, we certainly know that since the High Commissioner will be involved in Caribbean and, of course, Guyana, we're going to the future, he will not be able to resist taking the first opportunity to visit us again. And you know what? Remember, we have another elections coming up in 2025, so who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? If they're done that, so who knows? Let us see. Sir, on behalf of Room 592 and the Guyanese people, what one of our viewers would have sent in there, that message, I think it echoes all of our sentiments. And we do appreciate what you and the other diplomats would have stood for, especially during these 5 months. But also, there is a reason I raised the part about the security sector reform. Leonard raised the part about the oil sector. There is a lot of areas that a developed nation like Britain and other countries will really be helpful to Guyana, and we certainly look forward to the collaboration, and we really appreciate what you have done here personally, sir. When are you expecting to be leaving our shores?
Sometime before the end of this month. Exact details not yet done, but I would expect to be leaving flights allowing before the end of this month. Yeah.
Great, Leonard.
That would be very unfortunate because we had some plans for the good commissioner, but COVID-19 has restricted us. But I've loved for you to probably tell us, maybe be a little more specific. How do we go forward healing what would have been some very bad, bad things that would have happened to us over the last 5 months, ethnically and otherwise. So I'm not sure. Maybe very quickly you could tell us what we could do.
Well, actually, it's interesting you say that, Leonard, because I think it's a very difficult subject, and one of the things which I will be tasked with whenever I go back is to try and distill all of that stuff from Northern Ireland and the stuff from here to try and come up with a sort of a simple version, which would then cover, because I think it's too complicated a process to really explain it in 20 seconds, to be perfectly honest. But fundamentally, I think the two parts are political leadership and a clear belief and feeling in the population that they have had a chance to air their grievances. They have been listened to. Some of what they've wanted, they have got, not everything. And that if they've had to compromise, they realize the need to compromise is for the greater good.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say thank you very much, Commissioner. You've always been very engaging through Culture News, and I know the rest of Guyanese people. To echo what Yog and the other folks would have said, it's always been a pleasure. You've always been open, diplomatic at times, but very open to answering questions.
You're most welcome. It's always been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you so very much. And we do appreciate your company here in Room 592. May I extend an invitation to you, sir? After you have gone back and you're settled into your new role there, do drop into Room 592 at some time and tell us how it's going.
I will do. I'll be more than happy. Although don't forget, I'll be 5 hours ahead of you. So I'll
at the back of my mind, that's exactly the reason I want to
but I'll be more than happy to.
To see you with those red bleary eyes at midnight in Room 592. So look forward to that chat, sir. Hi, Commissioner, it's been a pleasure to have you here. And sir, we wish you well in your future endeavors. Of course, we will miss you as a people, but we know that Guyana is better off for you having been here for 5.5 years, sir. Thank you, and to your wonderful family, our best of regards. From a Guyanese to a Brit. Have a good...
Thank you very much, Yog.
Great. Thank you, sir. And have a good
evening. Leonard. Have a good weekend.
You too, sir. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was our High Commissioner, British High Commissioner to Guyana. He has said his parting words to us all here, as you know, and he will be leaving his post here in Guyana shortly, by the end of this month.